Good morning, friends. Good morning, friends. Hello, hello. How are you this morning? Good morning. Hey, Karen. Good morning to you. Hey, Jamie Battles. Good to see you. You are never late nor early. You are always on time. Great to see you. Good morning. How's everybody doing? A little mug up this morning. Do-do. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Jamie, that Mr. B is passed. I know that you've been a part of his walk for a while. So, uh, peace and grace to him and to you. Good morning, friends. If you're praying these days, please keep our friend Bonnie Braggett in your prayers for her health and that she might be well. That would be great. Good morning. All right, let's get going this morning. It is the 12th day of March on this 11/11. And I'm glad you're here and glad you're with us. And I hope this day finds you grand. That I want to talk today about there's a little line the um, from Psalm 35, 13 and 14. And there's actually a colloquialism that goes with it, a way that this gets translated that people don't always know, but I'll read it and then we'll talk about it. That it's this: they repay me evil for good and leave me like one bereaved. Yet when they were ill, I put on sackcloth and humbled myself with fasting. So there is this, you may think that, well, maybe that sounds vaguely familiar, or perhaps there's something in that I've heard before. They repay me evil for good and leave me like one bereaved. So you might have heard it lately more like no good deed goes unpunished, which is really what that is, can be translated as in a modern idiom. That there is this way, there is, it's the psalmist is entering into this idea that, and this that we all kind of stumble into every once in a while. That we're going along in our day, we'll try to do a good deed, and then all of a sudden, in the midst of the good deed, what? We're met with rudeness, we're met with unkindness, we're met with like one who are bereaved, right? Like, and so there is this way, we can quickly leap into this pattern of thinking that why bother? Why try? Why should I let that person into traffic? Because they're just going to flip me off anyway. Whatever it is, that why should I be kind to the world because my kindness is received often often with evil, and that and so and we can and our modern idiom for that is no good deed goes unpunished. So someday I want to put that on a coffee mug. No good deed goes unpunished. Psalm 35:13, which is like really that's what it says. And what it's saying is, and then verse 14 goes on to say, yet when they were ill, I put on sackcloth and humbled myself with fasting. This notion that no good deed goes unpunished. This is a spiritual state that we end up in. Okay, it's a state that we can find ourselves in, and the world will get us to that place. Again, this is not about judgment. This is not about being a bad person. That if you find yourself in this place, your mortal soul is in trouble. It means you're a person, and that in times we can our filter and our lenses on the world will get that way. And so the question becomes, what do we do about it? How do we contend with it? And that's what the verse 14 is about. And yet while they were ill, I put on sackcloth and humbled myself with fasting. This is not only is it this proto pray for your enemies part, but it is something that the psalmist is doing in order in order to address the world, in order to address this spiritual state, not because the person that did them evil needs to be prayed for, which they do, because it's been a practice of doing evil, they need prayers, but that that place that we find ourselves, where we can get jaded, or we can get anxious, or we can get depressed about the world around us and the world that we find us, where we can just say, oh, no good deed goes unpunished. They repay me evil for good and leave me like one bereaved. When our heart grieves, when our heart breaks for the world because we feel like we've offered it our goodness, and yet it's met with nothing but we kind of get nothing good back. What can we do about that? And I think the psalmist has a hint for us. And I humbled myself with fasting. When the early pilgrims came to America, and this was a part of their spiritual practice, we know their greatest spiritual practice that they practiced probably more than anything else. Um, it was that of thanksgiving. That there were often prayers of thanksgiving that were offered, and in fact, we've made a national holiday out of their spiritual practice. That every the last Thursday of every November, we kill a bunch of turkeys and we stuff a bunch of birds and we get fat and watch football as a way of offering thanks for the abundance that we have in our life. That is a legit spiritual. That was a spiritual practice. That was not about being able to take a day off. That was a legit spiritual practice. But the one we never talk about anymore, which was the counterpoint to the days of Thanksgiving, were what they called days of humiliation. Now, don't get too far down the road with that, because humiliation then doesn't mean what humiliation means now. But what we would call today days of fasting. That they would refrain from eating, they would refrain from drinking, and they would pray and they would fast. And that the prayer and fasting went right alongside, or were precursors to the Thanksgiving, because the prayer and the fasting was a way for them to get back to a state where they could authentically be thankful. That they would, because they were in the same boat we are. They're in the same world we are. I mean, theirs moved a little slower. They may have had a few more privations, and they couldn't just kind of and manipulate their environment quite as well as we can. But they still were in the world. They were still struggling with the things that we struggled with, and in doing so, they still could find themselves in that space where they say, "No good deed goes unpunished." Here we are. We've followed God all the way across the Atlantic. We've decided to create this new place, and what happens in the first winter? We lose half of our people. Boy, if that wouldn't make you jaded. If that wouldn't make you jaded. And yet, what is their response? They go to the days of humiliation. They fast, and then they go to days of thanksgiving. That so I want to talk a little bit about this fasting thing, because I think it is. I mean, it's an ancient spiritual practice. It's an important one, but I don't think we properly understand what it means, and I'm not going to do it justice either in the little time we have. But there's a few things to think about and to know in this about what it is we're talking about, and probably the most important thing is to know what we're not talking about. And so look, fasting is not about the mortification of the flesh. Okay, it's not about like beating yourself up so that you can feel so that you can bring about suffering because suffering is somehow a glory to God. That is it. There's a little piece in medieval theology that showed up in the church, and somehow we've all kind of got that as the cornerstone of what we believe these sorts of things are about. No, fasting is about taking on the passions of the world, because what happens is, and when we say the passions, we mean these the reality of being in the flesh, and the fact that we have, sometime today I'm going to want a sandwich, and then sometime tomorrow I'm going to want another one. That we have these appetites within us. And that, I'm going to, my arm might itch and I'm going to have a desire to scratch it. And then, but you know what, someday my arm is going to itch again and I'm going to have to scratch it again. That all of these desires, these pieces of ourselves that we have, that are a part of being in the world, are a part of being, well, in the world. And that those, they can lead us into this space where we end up saying, what? No good deed goes unpunished. And that the way to do the way that the psalmist is suggesting we address that, the way the pilgrims addressed that, the way the ancient Israelites addressed that, the way even modern Christians can enter into, is this idea of fasting. Now, it does, we talk about fasting for food because food is the most. They talk about fasting from food because food is the most primary. It's the most primal of all of the passions. Like, you got to eat. You can't not eat, so you have to contend with it. You can there are all the other passions you can negotiate in some sort of way. You can actually kind of go into full kind of ideas of abstention, even though I don't recommend it. But food, you got to contend with it. And so it's not this act of self-denial so that you can make yourself feel good about it. It's not about bringing suffering so that somehow pleases God. That's wackadoodle. Don't do that. It's not about some, like, you get this, like there's like some law of attraction thing, like if I give up this I'm going to get this, like some sort of transactional reality with God or something like that. It's not that. It's not even about a way of to assuage our guilt, like, oh, I feel bad about this, so I'll just beat myself up a little bit. Are you picking up what I'm laying down here? It's none of those things. It is about being able to let go and of our current spiritual framework and enter into the framework, into a new one. And the way to do that is to kind of decouple ourselves from the world that's got us in this cycle, because that's what it's built to combat, is this cycle of no good deed goes unpunished. The jadedness of our heart, the anxiety of our heart, the bereavement of our heart, the wrong thinking that we get into because we're just convinced that guy who cut us off in traffic is, look, he's absolutely out to get us. That our wrong, our stinking thinking around these things. When we refrain, when we abstain, when we fast for a little bit, it is about it is about uh, it is about being able to redraw our boundaries, and it involves regaining control over the things that are ruling us. Because if you really think about this, and I know this has been a long way to get to this point, but when we think about uh, this phrase, when we think about Psalm 35:13, no good deed goes unpunished. What we're doing is we're putting an authority outside of ourselves, right? Because there's somebody out there. There's somebody out there that is doing to us, that is not rewarding us for the good deed that we have done. There's a them and there's a they that is afflicting us. And we need to regain the spiritual control over our life. And so by removing some things, by removing some things. And it doesn't have to be food. It doesn't have to be, but by abstaining, by getting our own autonomy back, by getting our own boundaried self back, we actually take back from those and theys out there that are poking at us, those slings and arrows that are coming at us. We actually regain our own being and our own sense of self. And that the moment we do that, what flows in? God's grace and God's love for us. Because what God wants is to pour into us all good things. And that all those good things show up when we become a solid container. Because when we can hold it, and we can't hold it if we're always looking at the they and the thems that are out there afflicting us, right? Because that when we say that phrase, no good deed goes unpunished, when we say that, when we find ourselves in that spiritual state, what we're doing is putting all of that authority out there. And that the brilliance of fasting is that it's this physical thing, whether it's, and I don't care if it's technology fast, I don't care if it's a food fast, I don't care. It's something that it is a redrawing of a boundary in yourself. And that when we redraw that boundary, what we do is we give ourselves the gift of control over the things that we've allowed to rule us. And that the moment we do that, God's grace will show up and pour into it. And then when that grace shows up, what do we enter into? Thanksgiving. It becomes Thanksgiving. That the old Puritans knew this. They had refined this. And the reason they knew it is because they were contending with a really hard world. And that had called them to dig deep the well of their faith. And we can draw on that too. And so I want you to consider these fast days. That not that you're going to go keep the hard disciplines of other churches, but as we're kind of in this Lenten walk and as we're in this Lenten journey, I want you to consider what it is to draw some boundaries for yourself, to let go of some things that you might otherwise have done, to just maybe skip a meal intentionally, whatever. I mean, I don't know what your glycemic index is and you need to deal with all that, whatever. But to simply contend with remember that when you find yourself in this place of thinking and being jaded and being led by some other passion outside of yourself, when you say just no good deed goes unpunished, well, I want to invite you, there's a way out of that. And there's a way that God wants to be able to pour all good gifts into you. And that part of doing that is to, abstain a little bit. Redraw your boundary. And what that looks like in our life often is some form of fasting. All right, folks, that's my hope for you today. That's and a little reflection on on this Lenten journey. Let's just see who's here. Hey, Marianne. Hi. How are you? Jane, welcome. Donna, glad you're here. Good to see everybody. Peace and grace to you all. We'll, by the way, be at East Freetown Congregational Church tonight. I'll be giving a lecture on the Garden of Eden as we enter into our Lenten series of called Mr. Yahweh's Neighborhood. So we'll be going into that, and that'll be great fun. So that starts at 6 o'clock. If you're interested in more information, just message us. And so peace and grace to you all, and we'll pick it up tomorrow with another 11:11.